Begin the news at this hour with the Independent National Electoral Commission proposing a budget of 126 billion naira for its 2025 operations, citing the rising cost of conducting elections in Nigeria. INEC Chairman Professor Mahmood Yakubu expressed concern that the approved 40 billion naira for 2024 would be inadequate to cover the Commission's activities for the upcoming year. Yakubu underscored the financial burden of organizing 21 by-elections nationwide, with 11 still pending. He stressed that the Commission's activities are highly capital-intensive, necessitating substantial funding. To ensure the efficient and timely execution of elections, he proposed that election funding be sourced directly from the federal account. Meanwhile, the Senate and House of Representatives Committee on Electoral Matters commended INEC for its effective management of the 2024 elections despite limited resources. The committee also emphasized the importance of increased funding for 2025 to enhance the Commission's operations.
Honorable Bob, you touched on a very, very important issue. We need a big, major conversation in this country. Nigeria has no election season any longer. I said earlier that in Ghana, they conducted only 3 by-elections between one general election and another. In our own case, even before the midterm, vacancies have now occurred in 21 constituencies. But not only that, we also have 8 governorship elections conducted off-cycle. So the Commission is conducting elections virtually all year round. We have little time to recover our senses and begin to plan for the next election. For instance, in the election year 2023, we conducted 3 off-cycle governorship elections. The registered voters in some of the states is actually bigger than some of the countries in our sub-region. In Edo State, for instance, with 2.5 million registered voters, they have more voters than the Republic of Liberia. So a governorship election in Ondo is like Edo is like a governorship election in Liberia. The state with the smallest number of registered voters in Nigeria is Ekiti. Ekiti has more registered voters than the Republic of Gambia, and it has more registered voters than Guinea-Bissau and Cape Verde put together. So conducting election in Nigeria is huge. Then we come to the issue of cost of conducting elections. I'm going to say 2 things briefly, because I will speak to this in greater detail when I present our proposals for 2025 on the conduct of elections. But I think the second thing to say is that these are fresh elections, the by-elections, the off-cycle governorship elections, involving the whole gamut of the processes, including conduct of party primaries.
Now to further discuss this, I'm joined by Aniekan Joseph, as a public policy enthusiast. Aniekan, you're welcome to News Central. Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. So let's get your take on the 126 billion naira budget for INEC 2025. How does this reflect the growing financial demands of conducting elections in Nigeria? Is it just that it's based on the times, or are there extra needs when it comes to elections?
Thank you very much for having me, Mazino. INEC is not in the best of states. Let's just jump straight into the numbers. You need 126 billion. There are 20 new by-elections and 21 pending by-elections. That brings you to about 31 by-elections. And by his budget, he suggests he needs 4 billion naira per by-election. There may be a number of reasons. Of course, the logic probably is sound for the budget that he's asking. Unfortunately, for the results that INEC has been able to deliver in the 26 years that it's been doing this, makes it difficult for people to have any form of sympathy and understanding for the Commission. And there are 8 things that people typically look at when you're doing a review of an election and you're considering, so for instance, integrity, voter turnout, maybe campaign financing is neither here nor there, but access is a critical thing. How elections are administered and the types of relationships that should have fostered have been strengthened over the 26 years we're talking about. So when you look at how elections are done, it doesn't suggest to the Nigerian that INEC has learned lessons. For instance, we should have really strong, concrete relationships with NIPOST, CBN, NSCDC, the Nigerian Police Force, and we should see this relationship systematically reduce cost of elections. But it appears to us that with every election cycle, it seems to us that elections are being conducted for the first time. And so when they come with a budget of 126 billion, it may make sense, but the lived experience of Nigerians suggests that it's possibly another opportunity to waste the resources. Thanks.
So in light of the pending 11 by-elections and the overall capital-intensive nature of INEC's operations, what strategies could the Commission adopt to manage its resources more effectively?
Partnership is a critical strategy. Sometimes we act as though we are a different country. Within the federation called Nigeria, there are very strong, or there are institutions that can support INEC to deliver credible elections. So for instance, the NIPOST is supposed to provide logistical support. And if we cannot use NIPOST, a federal agency, to support our elections, we need to have clear conversations around it. The collaboration with the Nigerian Police Force and how security is a critical input to elections, we've not had that quality conversation around it yet. Why it looks like we can't figure it out. The Nigerian Security and Civil Defense Corps is another potential partner to strengthen security. We can work with the Association of Local Governments, depending on how granular we want to go with the level of support. The Central Bank of Nigeria could be a strong repository of election materials. We could work with strong rooms across the country to store materials if we do not have, because CBN offices are typically at the headquarters, state capitals rather. So we've got to strengthen partnerships with the media, press, telecommunications companies, because if these partnerships are strategic, it could improve efficiency, potentially reduce cost, and see the overall cost of election reduce. As a matter of fact, the typical cost per vote in developed economies or developed democracies is $1.6. But for Nigeria, over the period of time, is $5.4. So there's something about efficiency that we need to pay attention to, and perhaps partnerships is something that can drive that.
I'm tempted to ask you exactly what's responsible for the $5.4 that you spoke about as against 1.6 from other climes, but I'll move on. I have another question regarding Professor Mahmood's suggestion. He suggested that the funds directly be gotten or sourced from the federal account. How feasible is this recommendation, and how would it impact, or what impact could it have on the overall electoral process in Nigeria?
Theoretically, it's a brilliant idea. The fact that you are looking for a way for your commission to not depend on you going to politicians and office holders to get your resource out. However, legally, constitutionally, there are serious challenges around this. While I was just thinking through it, there was a court judgment that was instigated by the current FCT minister around the fact that monies from the federation account were paid to the Nigerian Police Trust Fund. And the matter was in court, and Justice Ahmed Mohammed of the Federal High Court in Abuja about 2 years ago mentioned that it was illegal for monies from the federation account to be paid to entities outside of the federal, state, and local government. So what Professor Mahmood may be asking for is a constitutional or legislative situation where INEC is considered a standalone entity, and then the federal accounts work with the Revenue Mobilization, Allocation, and Fiscal Commission can now make these monies available to INEC. And that is something that the National Assembly needs to create for it to happen. And you know that when the legislators are interested in something, it can be accelerated. My worry is that how does the independence of INEC benefit our current political players? And that is something that's going to be interesting for us to audit, so that although the theory of a matter makes sense, when it comes to creating the reality around it, we need to be careful to understand that it may take some time.
Aniekan, I want to say thank you very much. As always, you've been sublime. Thank you.
Excellent, Mazino. Many thanks.